When I think of the word hood, I think of a person, a place, and perhaps even a thing. I'm Sir Creepsta, and welcome back to Muhlenberg County Ghost Stories from the Hood. Tonight's tale of terror is entitled, Sometimes They Come Back. So, sit back, relax, and grab up some snacks and be entertained by yet another true ghost story from the Hood. For those of you who have followed me from the beginning, I salute each and every one of you. It's been my pleasure sharing the many stories involving demons, witches, two-legged creatures, and shadow people. I've also shared stories with you involving ghosts, poltergeists, and haunted houses. Tonight's tale of terror involves the latter three. It's a story about a haunted house located in Graham, Kentucky. It sits next to an old cemetery. And when I tell you that I was blown away when I first heard about it, I would put it mildly. But before I go any further, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my videos, and also share them. By May of 2024, Brian had experienced so much paranormal activity in his home that he was on the verge of submission. But being the strong-willed person that he always been, he refused to give in and allow the dark entities to take over something he dreamed about all his life, which was have his own home and a loving family to share it with. In the spring of 2019, Brian, whom I refer to in this story, along with his wife, had grown tired of apartment living and had decided to look around the county to see if they could find something for themselves to start a home that wouldn't bury them financially. Brian's wife was 3 months pregnant at the time, so finding a place large enough to raise a family was extremely important to the young couple. After going through the local papers and driving around the county, they were about to give up their search when, driving on the outskirts of Greenville, Kentucky, they stumbled upon a gravel road with a sign at the edge of the corner that said, "House for Sale." So Brian decided to drive down it just to take a look at the house. The road was a long one-way road that went about half a mile with nothing but woods on each side of it. Then it came to a dead end. The first thing Brian noticed once he reached the clearing was a cemetery to the left of him. This particular cemetery will play a major role in the story that I'm about to share with you. Next to the cemetery was an old 2-story home that looked like it had been built in the mid-20th century, with a for sign sale in the front yard. At the end of the road was one more house that looked to have been a little older, with a car parked in the driveway, which appeared to have had been driven in a while. The porch light to the house was on, letting Brian know that at least he had neighbors. Brian immediately called the realtor's number on the sign to set up a meeting with the agent. The following week, he and his wife met with the agent to get a walkthrough of the home and see what they were asking for it. After taking a walkthrough through the house, he saw right away that the house needed some major interior work done to it in some of the major rooms, mainly the kitchen and master bedroom. But after hearing the asking price for the home, he knew that there was no way he was about to let this house get away from him. After going to the bank and securing a home loan, he and his wife began to move into their new home about 3 weeks later. Brian went straight to work on remodeling the home, and it was that time that things would never be the same for him nor his wife. It was around 3:30 a.m., the first night staying in the house, that Brian was awakened by what sounded like dishes falling out of the kitchen cupboards. When he made his way to the kitchen, to his surprise, they were scattered all over the floor. As he bent down to start picking up the ones that were broken, the kitchen light started rapidly flickering off and on. Startled but not scared, Brian just shook it off as the house, being so old, it was still settling, and the lights that were just perhaps cause of faulty wiring. So, after cleaning up the mess, he went back to bed. The following day, Brian checked the wiring and found nothing wrong with it. But like clockwork, he and his wife were awakened from their sleep the following morning at around 3 a.m. to the exact same thing. Dishes falling and breaking, as well as lights flickering on and off. This pattern would go on for the next several nights. It was around this time that panic started to set in, especially with his wife, and he knew that something strange and unusual was definitely going on inside his home. But the problem was that he had no idea what it was, nor how to go about dealing with it. So he made up his mind that whatever it was that he and his family were dealing with, he wasn't going to allow it to run them out of their new home. Not one to truly believe in the paranormal, he got on his computer and started researching how to deal with an haunting, which was exactly what he had going on in his home at the time. Most of the research he gathered called for the burning of sage to purify the house, and the sprinkling of salt on the window panes and in the doorways. This method was said to ward away any spirits, and was exactly what Brian started to do. But little did Brian know, this would be a huge mistake. According to Brian, as soon as he attempted to do the blessing ritual, his house began to shake as if it were in a mini earthquake, and did not stop shaking until he put out the burning sage and smeared the salt from the doorways and window panes. This terrified his wife quite naturally, but it only made Brian even more angry, so he cursed at the entity in his house, telling it to get the hell out of here right now and leave his family alone. A few days passed by without any incident, giving Brian a temporary sigh of relief, allowing him to feel that what he had done had worked. So he immediately went back about his business and continued to remodel the house. About a month after moving into the home, on his way to the house from work, Brian passed by a funeral session going on. Up until now, he didn't even know that the cemetery before he got to his house was still even in use. Reason being, he was away from home most of the day at work. But on this day, he had taken off early to take his wife to the doctor to get a checkup to see how their baby was coming along. As he slowly drove by the cemetery, he recalled how a bone-curdling chill ran up and down his body for some reason. It was a feeling that he had never experienced before. But paying it no mind, Brian went about his business of getting home and taking his wife to the doctor. The remaining part of the day went just fine, with no incident. It wasn't until around 3 a.m. that this would all change. This time, rather than hearing dishes falling out of the cupboards and lights flickering, he thought that he heard a knocking at his door. So he jumped up out of bed and went to the front door. But as he passed by the living room window, he glanced out of it and saw what resembled a silhouette of a man in a dark suit, slowly walking away from the front door. So he rushed to the door, unlocked it, and went outside, and did a complete walk around of the house, only to find no one. The man in the suit had simply vanished without a trace. Feeling more puzzled than scared, Brian went back to the house, explained to his wife what had happened, and fell back asleep. The following morning, Brian went outside to see if he could find any evidence that the man had been there, and to his surprise, coming from the cemetery leading up to his door were footprints that seemed to have belonged to a large man. This was the start of a pattern for Brian and his family. For every time that there was a funeral session, the family would be awakened from their sleep by either knocks at the door or apparitions standing outside of the window. They would only vanish into thin air once Brian went outside to investigate the situation. And up until this very day, according to Brian, they did visit him after every funeral session, like lost souls trying to find their way to the other side. Stay tuned for part 2 coming soon, entitled Sometimes They Come Back Again. And that's all for now, folks. Hope you enjoyed this story. I'm Sir Creepsta, and like always, stay terrified. Ha 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 ha!